on to the Anomaly Podcast. I am so excited to be here today. I have Mr. Bill Parker, who is the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service office in Jackson, Mississippi. And today we'll just have a free flowing conversation. Bill will tell his story and tell us who he is, and also talk to us a little bit about his work and how it impacts vulnerable communities. So, Bill, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Jamese. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And, you are my first guest on this podcast. And I certainly want to honor you and all of the work that you have done and say thank you. You and our big sister, Cindy, who she's
Mhm.
not here today, but Cindy was is someone who I will probably mention a lot. She is not only a former supervisor, but she is my sorority sister, a fellow Jackson State University alum. But Cindy and Bill have had such a major impact on my career. And so I just want to tell you thank you for your mentoring and all that you do, not just for me, but for others as well, and your dedication to your work and to the office. So
Well, thank
I'm going to stop talking for a moment and allow Bill to just tell us your story. Tell us who you are, how you came about in doing what you're doing.
I'm Bill Parker. I am, you know, just a child of God. That's what I like to say. I'm glad that God placed me on this earth with the parents that I have. I
Mm.
have born and raised in New Orleans. My dad is William Parker Sr. He's actually from Mississippi, from a
Okay.
little town called Heidelberg. And my mom is actually from Mississippi as well. Her name is Bonnie Parker, and she is from a town called same town called Heidelberg. So all of my roots are like in this one city.
Okay.
My mom left that town when she was 5 years old and moved to New Orleans, and then so later on in life, her and my dad met um, through her aunt and his uncle,
Oh, nice.
and so them two, God allowed them to bring me into this world, and so growing up in New Orleans, getting quickly to the weather side of the story, just being growing up and being impacted by hurricanes and different types of weather, but especially hurricanes.
Hmm.
That is what got my interest in weather and in meteorology.
Okay.
And so I really didn't know I wanted to be a meteorologist. I just was really interested in the weather.
Okay.
And as I got into the high school, I took this class, a statistics class, and the class kind of talked about how meteorologists comes up with their pops,
Hmm.
their chances of precipitation,
Okay.
and so that really piqued my interest to really pursue the field,
Hmm.
and that's how I kind of got into meteorology. Um, had a desire to go to Florida State for meteorology because I wanted to study hurricanes, and I figured, okay, that's a coastal um, university that's near the coast,
Hmm.
but I couldn't afford it. I saw what the cost was to go to that university, and I just really couldn't afford it.
Okay.
And so I had an uncle who found out that Jackson State University had a meteorology program. And that's how I ended up at Jackson State University.
Awesome. And I will put a plug in here for JSU because, as I mentioned, we both graduated from there. But Jackson State University has the oldest meteorology program at a historically Black college or university. And I know it's a program that many people don't know about, but it has certainly produced some of the top meteorologists within our nation who are at the table making decisions every day in federal government agencies as well as private industry and also in broadcast meteorology. So it's an extremely important program. And if there's anyone who's interested in learning more about the program, I certainly encourage you to, reach out to the university to find out more information. So thank you, Bill. As you mentioned, you were not aware of the program at Jackson State.
Hmm.
So when you came into Jackson State, were you a meteorology major or did you come in majoring in something else
No,
first?
I came in majoring in meteorology. Once I found out that Jackson State had a meteorology program, I decided to go there. Other than that, I probably would have went in state to a university in Louisiana.
Okay.
Probably majored in physics or chemistry or something related to the field of meteorology.
Hmm.
But and for instance, the University of Louisiana Monroe had a program, but I didn't know they had a meteorology program.
Okay.
So I came to Jackson State specifically for that meteorology program.
Mhm. And how did that program, when you look back on things now, how did your matriculation through that program get you to where you are now? Are there some pivotal things that happened while you were a student that you can touch back on now that impact the work that you do now?
Well, you know, I'll just say Jackson State University, the family atmosphere was an immediate impact.
Hmm.
Just the university culture
Right.
there had an immediate impact on who I was as a human being. I'm gonna be honest. Me and my wife tell us all the time. She went to Grambling State University, and we grew up pretty much in a predominantly black society down in New Orleans. We went to public schools, but we didn't learn black history like we learned it until we got to an HBCU.
Hmm.
And so just that culture alone, learning more about who we are as a society and the impact that we make on society, the university prepared you for that.
Yes.
And so then getting into the meteorology program, we had, you know, two professors who pretty much taught all of our meteorology courses.
Hmm.
Um, the probably largest class I probably had in the field of meteorology maybe had 5 students
Yes.
at the most. And so we really had one-on-one time with our professors who were able to really um, get to know us, get
Hmm.
to know our weaknesses, get to know our strengths, but also was patient with us,
Right.
um, gave us time, extra time for tutoring and different things like that. And so that was I think that program was perfect for me because if
Hmm.
I had went to a larger school, I don't know, I probably could have got swallowed up.
Yeah.
Most of your um, PWI programs, the majority of the students are white,
Mhm.
whereas at Jackson State, most of the students look like me. So,
Right. And so, I'm going to let you touch on, the work that you do now and even your career path leading up to your current position. But, the Anomaly podcast, the title, The Anomaly, touches on, those of us who um, are the majority of our workday is spent in a room with people who don't look like us.
mhm,
We typically have a different perspective because of our experiences and what it is that we see. We're very proud of who we are and where we've come from. But oftentimes, when you're in the room and that your perspective is completely different, that
different.
that sense of belonging and can get lost, and you can oftentimes feel like you're alone and having to navigate that. um, you talked about being at an HBCU and being surrounded by those who do look like you, and then going out into the work environment where it's completely different.
Mhm.
Can you just talk a little bit about that and how you have navigated?
Yeah. So when you walk into um, the workforce, especially in our field, there's not many folks who, especially in leadership, who look like us.
Hmm.
So you don't have many mentors to grab to,
Right.
a hold to, and typically, it's not, especially starting out your career. It's not like you're looking for someone. Usually, it's best if someone comes to you and say, "Hey, I want to help you grow."
Hmm.
And so I never forget when I first walked into the weather forecast office that I worked at. Um, I saw different meteorologists gravitating to others to help them learn, and I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I had to develop, the skill set on my own. Now, I'll just say this: God worked it out where there was a HMT, which that stands for hydrometeorological technician. There the supervisor, he was African American, and the electronic system analyst was also in the office that I went in. They were African American.
Hmm.
And even though they couldn't teach me meteorology, they could teach me how to navigate in the office
Right.
culture,
That culture.
that culture. Um, and so that was pivotal for me.
Mhm.
Um, And so when you get out into these places and you're different, I still walk into rooms where, I'm the only black man in the room
Mhm.
with a bunch of scientists, you know, most majority predominantly white.
Right.
And so over the years, I've learned to build up the courage. I know who I am
Mhm.
in Christ, and I know how to stand on my own 2 feet. But
Right.
for a while, when I walked in the room, really was silent
Mhm.
because I knew that my perspective, where I came from, was different from from where my associates came from.
Right.
And so I would tell anyone who's watching the podcast, first you got to know who you are.
Yes.
And you got to know that the education that you have is just as good as the education that someone else had.
Mhm.
Um, that you're there to learn, but they're also there to learn from you as well. And so just because you're different,
Mhm.
just because um, you may be the anomaly in the room, it doesn't mean that you should be silent.
Right.
You got to still be able to have courage enough to know that your voice matters.
Mhm. Absolutely. And as a scientist, when we encounter anomalies, it's an opportunity to learn, like you said,
Hmm.
um, that there are outliers, but this is an extremely important bit of information to know because you need to know how these anomalies can change the whole picture.
Hmm.
And making sure that we are including and accounting for the differences that occur. Bringing that into the
Hmm.
workplace, and oftentimes, the focus has been on diversity,
Hmm.
missing the inclusion and the equity aspect
Hmm.
of it. And in my point of view, that equity, inclusion, and access needs to be within the culture, in order to achieve that diversity. What oftentimes leaders are looking for. When we talk about weather and climate, it is extremely important to have these different perspectives because it impacts everyone,
Hmm.
you know. But oftentimes, as you mentioned, if leadership only looks one way, then you're missing the opportunity to understand what's happening really across the nation or across the world, the people that we are really trying to save and impact. So I know that in your position, you do storm assessments. You
Hmm.
go out into different communities across the state of Mississippi,
Hmm.
following severe weather, whether it is, tornadoes or other high wind events.
I wouldn't say that, especially when I go into a situation where people have lost everything.
Hmm.
Tornado is going through, and they have nothing left, or their house is just been impacted by the storm. Maybe it didn't take it all the way out, but they need help.
Right.
And so what I find out is usually when I go into the community, and as a meteorologist, I can't just look at the event itself and not
Hmm.
talk to the people who are impacted by the weather.
Right.
Often and I'm just going to be honest with you, sometimes you have meteorologists who do storm surveys, they're doing the assessment and they're assessing the storm, but they're not assessing how the storm impacted the people. The only way you can assess how the storm really impacted people is by getting out the truck,
Hmm.
going talk to those who were impacted by the storm, and understanding if they got a message, did they understand, weather would get bad on that day. Just asking just basic, simple questions.
Hmm.
And so what I found out is that people who've been impacted by a storm, they're often willing to talk to anyone who's willing to they feel that can help them,
Okay.
especially if it's from the standpoint of having a better result or knowing about, the warnings we issue,
Hmm.
how they can better protect themselves.
Hmm.
Um, and just information on how they can better recover from the storm,
Right.
that's been impacted at that time. So I found that it doesn't matter what community I go in.
Hmm.
If I have information that I can provide to them that can help them through the situation that they're going through, maybe provide them with the name of their emergency manager because they may not even know the name of their emergency manager.
Right.
Provide them with a phone number of how they can contact FEMA if they qualify for that.
Mhm.
Just things like that. I think that when you walk into these communities where people have been impacted by storms, they're willing to talk, they're willing to listen to you.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter what my race is. Can you help?
Yes. Mhm.
Can you help me? And so now, when it comes to outreach, and I know it makes a big difference, representation matters.
Right.
And so if I'm trying to recruit or talk to a student about, maybe pursuing a career in meteorology, if it's a young black male or a young black female and they see another person that looks like them, that automatically garners interest
Mhm.
in the field. Because and I've this has happened to me on many occasions. I've gone out and I've given talks and I say, I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and um, I can't tell you the amount of times that it's not students, but it's usually teachers. I've never seen a African American meteorologist.
Mm.
When we talk about folks like us who are you yourself as a PhD scientist in this field,
Mhm.
I have 30 years of experience with the National Weather Service and issuing warnings, life-saving warnings for the public. They've never seen someone like us,
Mhm.
and so that makes a difference. That makes a difference.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, because it is important that we continue to talk about, the different aspects of the career of
Hmm.
meteorology. So often, when I would say, "Well, I'm a meteorologist," the first thing people say is, "What station are you on?"
Yep.
And I'm like, "No, that's not what I do."
Hmm.
Most of my background has been in scientific advancements for numerical weather prediction, the models that that you and others in your office actually use
Utilize.
to
Hmm.
predict the weather.
Hmm.
And there are so many other aspects of meteorology, and like you said, many people just don't know about them.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do currently in your office, and perhaps maybe touch on, not just how meteorologists are hired within in the weather service, but even some other disciplines as well, and what it takes to actually create the forecast in order for people to take action.
So I'm the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service here in Jackson, Mississippi, and pretty much I'm the manager, the overseer of the office. In our office, um, we have a staff of around 28 people. The majority, I would say, probably about 20, 22 of those are actually meteorologists.
Mm.
We have an electronic staff who maintain a lot of our equipment, like our radars, our observing equipment, and things of such. We have one hydrologist, but he's also a meteorologist. But he pretty much handles our hydrology program, our rivers and lakes, and forecasting of those. And then we have support staff. We have an um, information technology officer.
Mhm.
Of course, I have as a manager of the office, I have an administrative assistant who
Mhm.
supports me in making sure that all of the bills get paid and the staff get paid as well.
It's important.
And so that's always important. Um, and so we cover much of central Mississippi. We cover northeast Louisiana and southeast Arkansas, two counties in southeast Arkansas. We are the what is called the liaison office for Mississippi. So we work with the state government. We work with MEMA very, very closely
Mm.
as far as making sure that they know when weather is getting bad and approaching the state as a whole. And so there are four offices that cover the state of Mississippi: the Jackson office, the Memphis office, the New Orleans office, and then Mobile covers the extreme southeast part of the state.
Okay.
And so we coordinate with them on a lot of the weather information throughout the whole state. And we send one specific message to MEMA. Rather than them having to talk to four different offices, they can talk to one office. We collaborate, coordinate, and then we send one message to them. Um, it's very important um, job that we have.
Mhm.
The National Weather Service mission is to save life and property.
Absolutely.
Um, and our state, when you look at Mississippi, it's one of the when you look at a vulnerability map, the whole
Mhm.
state lights up.
Yeah.
And so I always tell my meteorologists, whenever you go out in this state, you're talking to a vulnerable community.
Mhm.
Period. You don't have to look for a vulnerable community. No matter where you go in our state, it's pretty much you're talking to a vulnerable community.
Mhm.
Um, Mississippi State, based on percentage, there are more African Americans in this state percentage wise than any other state. And so, educating minority and underserved communities, especially Hispanic, and we have, a huge Native American community
Yeah.
in the state of Mississippi as well. That's important. And so I always like to say weather impacts everyone.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you're black or white, rich or poor,
Mhm.
green or yellow, doesn't matter. Um, it impacts everyone. And so our office plays a huge role when it comes to diversity, when it comes to making sure that we reach underserved and vulnerable communities, when it comes to making sure that we are communicating with minority communities. We it's a huge role.
Mhm.
And so because usually when you look at the storms that we receive, these these tornadoes that are, you know, changing communities forever. You look at Rolling Fork. Um, you know, I believe, Rolling Fork will rise again, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take some help, and so um, we understand that it's up to us to get to people before the event, to communicate, to give the education about how you survive these storms. Um, it's up to us to go out and do that.
Mhm.
And so that's what I do at the National Weather Service here in Jackson. Yes, we forecast the weather, but we serve the people in the community.